Our first reading of today is taken from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 18, verses 21 to 28. And in these verses, Ezekiel gives the example of two kinds of persons. On the one hand, he gives the example of a wicked person, a sinful person, a selfish and self-centered person. And he says, if that wicked and sinful person comes to his or her senses and realizes that that is not the way to live, if that wicked person changes his or her ways by not sinning, by reaching out, by giving bread to the hungry, by being kind to the poor, the Lord will look at that person and the Lord will save that person. The Lord will take that person back to the Lord's heart. The second example he gives is of the righteous person, the person who follows the law, the person who is selfless. It is likely that the person who is righteous and selfless might be doing it only for external reward. And when the reward does not come, the person might tire and go back to the ways of the wicked and the sinful. If that happens, Ezekiel says, the person who was righteous but has now become wicked and sinful and self-centered is a person who will not be close to the Lord, whom the Lord will distance away, because the Lord is just, the Lord is right, and the Lord is truth, and above all, the Lord is love. And that is why in the gospel text of today, taken from the gospel of Matthew chapter 5, verses 20 to 26, Jesus asks us to assimilate, to interiorize, to take the external of the law into our hearts and in our minds. And he does that by speaking about what was said in the Old Testament and how that must be interpreted now in his time. In the Old Testament, it was said that one must not kill another human being, and that anyone who killed would be liable to judgment. Jesus says killing is the extreme. I am telling you now that you must avoid even being angry unnecessarily. There are times when there is righteous anger, but a lot of our anger is for ourselves. A lot of our anger is because we have been hurt. People sometimes like to give the example of Jesus going to the temple, and an incident narrated by all the four gospels. Was Jesus not angry at that time? Jesus was angry not because his personal life was affected. Jesus was angry, and it was a righteous anger, because the poor at his time were being shortchanged. The poor at his time were being subjected to injustice and oppression. That was the anger of Jesus. It was not a personal anger. It was not someone who hurt him. As a matter of fact, even when he's slapped at the trial by the guards standing by, he does not respond in anger. Even when Pilate will question him and the Sanhedrin questions him, he does not respond with anger. His anger is a righteous anger. And so when Jesus asks us not to be angry, what he is saying is we must not be angry for selfish reasons. If somebody has hurt me, if somebody has betrayed me, as a matter of fact, even when Judas betrays him, even when Peter denies him, he is not angry with them because it never affected him personally. He did not reach out in anger to them. What Jesus did instead was reached out in love to Peter. He would also have reached out in love to Judas. And so he says, if our offering, if our coming for the sacrament of the Eucharist, if our making any oblation to God has to have any value, we must do it not only externally. We must be present at that oblation, at the sacrifice of the Eucharist, not only with our bodies. We must also be present with our minds. In other words, if our minds are clean and devoid of any of these negatives, very especially the negative of anger, then our offering becomes a fragrant offering to the Lord. Then, as Ezekiel says, we remain like the righteous person doing what is right, because our hearts are in the right place and our hearts prompt us to do what is right. Will you focus not merely on your external actions, but also on the attitude with which you perform those external actions?